Did Jesus really rise from the dead? There's an important piece of evidence staring us in the face, and yet most people miss it. I'm talking here about the survival of Christianity itself. I'm going to argue that from the beginning, Christianity was a movement whose very survival depended upon its actually being true. In other words, if Jesus didn't rise from the grave, you would never have heard his name. Now, some people miss this by separating the question of whether Jesus actually died and rose from the influence of Christianity in the world. And they think, did he die? Maybe. Did he rise? Probably not. But certainly you can see the appeal of such a compelling message. This is just wrong. If you evaluate the claims of the Christian message in the context of the first century Roman world, it looks like a movement doomed to failure from the start. It's the story of a God who becomes a man only to die by crucifixion. In the first century, the cross was not a beautiful religious symbol of sacrificial love. It was a torture device. It was designed to be the most agonizing, humiliating way to die. And so the idea that anyone would worship a crucified God was absurd. As absurd as the idea that somebody would come back from death, leaving behind an empty tomb. Sometimes we wrongly assume that we enlightened moderns understand the permanence of death, and those gullible ancient peoples must have thought people just bounced back and forth from death willy-nilly. But it's just not the case. Humans have always recognized death as a permanent condition. That's why in Acts chapter 17, for instance, when the Apostle Paul is preaching the gospel and he comes to the doctrine of the resurrection, the Athenian philosophers mock him openly because they recognized this is not a thing that happens. Added to all of this would have been the crowning absurdity that it would be worship of a crucified God that unites Jews and Gentiles together in harmonious, loving fellowship. In other words, this is not a message anyone saw coming. It's not a message anyone wanted. And yet, here we are. How? Why? How does Christianity survive when all the prejudices and the sensibilities of the time were arrayed against it? Because the one thing that it had going for it is that it was actually true. The disciples were unstoppable, could not be deterred from proclaiming the good news of salvation through faith in Jesus because they had actually seen him alive from the dead. Their claims could not be refuted because the tomb was actually empty. Now, I could see an objection here. Someone might say, but take Islam. You Christians reject Islam as untrue, yet it grew. It's huge. It's expanded into this great global force. And so does the growth of Islam lead us to conclude that it must therefore be true? And to that I would say no, and here's the crucial difference. Christianity grew in spite of violent opposition. Christians were willing to die for their beliefs because they were so convinced of the truth of the gospel message. Islam grew by violence. The early Muslim converts were willing to submit to Muhammad because they knew he was ready and willing to kill for his beliefs. So while truth was the secret weapon of Christianity, the not-so-secret weapon of Islam was the sword. So once again, we're only here talking about Jesus because it's true, because this is what happened historically. He really died. He really rose. So listen, I don't want you to take my word for it. Read the Bible for yourself. Dig into the New Testament. Evaluate the evidence. Get into the details. If you'd like some help on where to start, I've attached a link to a free Bible study guide in the description below. But here's what I want you to understand. This is reality. These are the facts. The God who created the world really did come down to die in our place, triumphed over death in his resurrection from the grave, and offers free and full forgiveness to all who trust in him. It's the best news in the world. Don't miss it. I'm Ben Owens for Prospect Avenue Baptist Church. Thanks, and God bless.